It's your favorite math professor here, Dr. Tarcia Hubert, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to solve quadratic equations using factoring, okay? So let's jump right on in. First of all, what is a quadratic equation? I'm glad you want to know. A quadratic equation is an equation of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0. So what is it that we're looking for? We're looking for one variable, we're looking for an equal sign, and we're looking for a highest exponent of 2 on that variable. If you have those three things, then you have a quadratic equation, all right? Now, the goal of solving quadratic equations by factoring is to be able to write this quadratic that's on the left side of the equal sign as the factor of two linear expressions, okay? So remember, when you factor, that's basically taking that and rewriting it as something times something, all right? Once you can get it in that form, you end up using what's called the zero product property. And the zero product property says that if I have a times b equal to 0, that means if I have two things that multiply to give me 0, then what we know for sure is that one of those things have to be 0. So either a is 0 or b is 0, or they could both be 0, but we know for sure at least one of them is 0. And so once we get our factors down, say something times something equals 0, then we can use the zero product property to break those apart and say that one of these has to be 0 in order to make this true. All right, so let's look at an example on how to use the zero product property to solve quadratic equations. In this first example, we're going to solve x squared minus 6x plus 8 equal to 0. All right, and this is a quadratic. How do you know a quadratic equation? It has one variable x, it has an equal sign, and the highest exponent on the x is a 2. That's what makes it quadratic, all right? Now, we specifically want to solve this by factoring. So we want to factor this quadratic on the left side over here. And remember, and if you don't know how to factor and you didn't watch my videos on factoring, you want to go back and watch those 4 videos. There was one on greatest common factor, one on difference of squares, and then there were 2 on factoring trinomials, a part 1 and a part 2. So if you don't know how to factor, go back and watch those videos, because you have to know how to factor in order to solve these by factoring. All right. So when I factor this, I want to take factors of that last number, 8. So I want to find 2 numbers that multiply to give me 8, but add to give me that middle number, -6. All right. And when you think about it, 4 times 2 is 8, but 4 plus 2 is 6. And I need it to be -6. So basically what I need to do is change the sign on both of those. And that gives me -4 times -2 equals +8. And -4 plus -2 is a -6. So those are my factors right there. -4 and -2. So this quadratic factors into x minus 4, x minus 2. And then all of that still equals 0. So now what I need to do is, since I have 2 things that multiply to give me 0, now I can use the zero product property that says if these 2 things multiply to give me 0, then one of these for sure has to be 0. So I take both of these and I set them equal to 0. Because if either one of these equals 0, then that will make my equation equal 0. And then I solve both of these. These are linear expressions. So in order to solve for x here, I will add 4 to both sides, and that gives me x equal to 4. That's one answer. In order to solve for x over here, I need to add 2 to both sides, and that gives me x equal to 2. And so you end up with 2 answers, x equal 4 and x equal 2. Either one of those answers will make that equation true, all right? Let's look at another example. In this example, we want to solve x squared plus 7x plus 10 equal to 0. As you can see, this is a quadratic equation. There's one variable x, the highest exponent on that variable is 2, and there is an equal sign, which makes it an equation. Now, this is a quadratic on the left side, and I want to factor it. There is no number in front of the x squared, so all I need to do is find factors of 10 that add to 7. That's 2 numbers that multiply to give me 10, but add to give me 7, and that will be 5 and 2. 5 times 2 is 10, and 5 plus 2 is 7. So this will factor into x plus 5 times x plus 2. And all of that still equals 0. And since you have 2 things that multiply to give you 0, then one of those things has to be 0. So you take them both and set them equal to 0. and then you solve for x. So here you would subtract 5 from both sides. You get x equal to -5. Here you would subtract 2 from both sides, and you get x equal to -2. And so your two answers are -5 and -2. All right, let's look at another example. All right, in this example, we want to solve 2x squared plus 8x equals 0. Now, you notice this is still a quadratic equation. It has one variable, equal sign, highest exponent is 2. However, there is not 3 terms on the left side. There's only 2 terms. So if there's only 2 terms, either you can isolate x if there's only one x, or you can factor out of x, meaning you can factor out a greatest common factor on these, okay? So in this case, there isn't only one x, so I can't isolate x, but what I can do is I can factor out an x. I can also factor out a 2, because if you notice, both of those terms have a 2 in them. So I'm going to factor out 2x, and when I take out 2x, essentially what I do to figure out what's left is I divide by 2x. That leaves me with the x here, and that leaves me with a 4 here. So you're left with x plus 4 on the inside, all right? And I'm just going to erase this because I was only showing you that to show you how I figure out what's left inside those parentheses, all right? So now I have 2x times x plus 4 equals 0. If you don't believe me, distribute that 2x back in and you will get the 2x squared plus 8x, all right? Now I can take both of those factors. I have 2x times x plus 4 equal to 0. So take both of those factors and set them equal to 0 and solve for x. In order to solve for x on this first one, I will need to divide both sides by 2. And that will give me x is equal to 0 over 2, which is 0. And then on the second one, to solve for x, I would need to subtract 4 from both sides. And that will give me x equal to -4. So I get x is equal to 0 and x is equal to -4 in this problem, all right? Let's do one more example. In this last example, we want to solve 3x squared plus 8x plus 4 equals 0. This is also a quadratic equation. You have a variable x, just one. You have an equal sign, and the highest exponent is 2. However, in this case, I can still solve by factoring, but I have a number in front of the x squared. So if you remember, when we talked about factoring, you can either use the AC method or you can use the shortcut to the AC method. Either way it goes, you have to multiply the a times the c. In this case, your a is that 3 and your c is that 4. So you have to multiply 3 times 4 and you get 12. And then you find factors of 12 that add to the b term, which is the middle term, which is 8. And when you think about it, 4 times 3 is 12, but when you add those together, you get 7. Or 6 times 2 is 12, and when you add those together, you do get 8, all right? And so those are your factors. So I'm going to use the shortcut method, which I'm just going to rewrite this as x plus 6, x plus 2. However, I can't just leave it like that because there was a 3 in front. I have to divide each of these by 3. And so 6 divided by 3 is 2, so that gives me x plus 2 right there. And before I wrote that number that was in the denominator in front of the x, that's when we were factoring. However, since we're solving, I don't have to write that 3 in front of the x. I could leave it like that because I'm going to end up solving for x anyway. So you want to take both of these terms or both of these factors and set them equal to 0. So you get x plus 2 equal to 0. Solve for x. Subtract 2 from both sides. You get x is equal to -2. That's one answer. And here you got x plus 2/3 equals 0. Subtract 2/3 from both sides. The 2/3 there cancel, and you get x is equal to -2/3. That's your other answer, all right? So you have two answers, -2 and -2/3. And so that's how you solve quadratic equations by factoring, all right? The main thing is you have to know how to factor. So if you don't know how to factor, you're going to struggle with this. So you definitely need to go back and review factoring. If you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments. If these videos have been helping you, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. And I just want to thank you all for tuning in to these videos. I hope they're helping. If you haven't signed up for the free course, go ahead and sign up for the free course. You can get the information on that in the description so that you can be practicing more after you watch these videos, okay? Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you all in the next video.